I am super excited about this guest. I just did a workshop based on one of his books with one of my clients a month ago, and they ate it up. And I first saw him speak. God, it was probably 8 or 9 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, fell in love with it. So I'm super excited to have him on the show. A 1981 U.S. Naval Academy graduate, Captain David Marquet, served in the U.S. submarine force for 28 years. After being assigned to command the nuclear power submarine USS Santa Fe, then ranked last in retention and operational standing, he realized the traditional leadership approach of take control, give orders wouldn't work. He turned this ship around by treating the crew as leaders, not followers, and giving control, not taking control. This approach took the Santa Fe from worst to first, achieving the highest retention and operational standing in the Navy. He's the author of Turn the Ship Around, a true story of turning followers into leaders. Fortune magazine called the book the best how-to manual anywhere for managers on delegating, training, and driving flawless execution. He's also the author of Leadership is Language. Captain Marquet retired from the Navy in 2009. He now speaks to those who want to create empowering work environments that release the passion, initiative, and intellect of each person. His bold and highly effective framework is summarized as give control, create leaders. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike, for having me on the show. Yeah, that was Vern who wrote that Fortune
Did he?
blurb. Vern Harnish wrote that Fortune blurb, which I really respected because it was right when the book came out, and everybody else. When you write a book, it's a terrible experience, and you publish it, and your mom buys it, and you're kind of hoping that something's going to happen. And most people, when you send it to them, it's like, well, who are you? And like, how many followers do you have on Twitter? It's like 0 and 0. But Vern read the book and he named it number
Him
one
and your mom,
business
those are the
book
two
of the
folks
year.
that read the book initially.
Yeah, those are the two first. Yeah, those are patient 0 and 1. But of course, after Vern said that, I was off to the races. So I'm truly indebted to those who, to Vern in particular, and those who are willing to engage and really understand content.
Yeah, love it.
So
And
thanks for that. That's why I'm
interestingly
here.
enough, Vern wrote the foreword to my first book. So we're
Ah,
in good
super.
company. So, hey, I want to ask
Yeah.
you, before we dive in specifically to your book and your experience, and I want you to tell us the story of the USS Santa Fe. I've read about it a couple times now. I read your book twice, so I know it pretty well, but I'd rather you tell it than me. But this show is all about creating better leadership teams. So I want to ask you from your experience, as a sub captain, and then your experience since then of working with organizations, what do you think is the one most important characteristic of a great leadership team?
They got to refer to each other with the word we. And when I talk to teams, as soon as I hear they, I know there's fractures and there's problems. Oh, those guys are in marketing and they're in engineering or whatever it happens to be. And I like to listen to the language pretty carefully. And when I hear we, even if someone knows it was really the other person's fault, they say, well, we let the customer down. That's going to be a good team because you don't have blame. You have high trust. It's gonna work together, and then that's going to cascade out. That feeling, that culture, that practice will then cascade out. So, if the leaders can say we, then two levels down, some engineer and software can say we about someone over in sales, and that's going to cascade down. It's going to pay off big dividends throughout the
I
organization.
love that because what I've seen, and I work with leadership teams, pretty much all day, every day. Although I guess not all day,
Yeah.
every day. Right now, I'm talking to you, but other than that, and one of the interesting things I find, and you just referred to it, is if let's say the VP of sales and VP of service are not getting along real well at a leadership team level,
Yeah.
I know as I cascade down that organization, that problem's getting worse, not better. So I love that. If they're not saying we at that level, it's
Right.
getting worse as you go down, not
Right.
better.
It only gets worse. Right. It only gets worse. We had a client where we had a situation like that, and the CEO was pulling his hair out, and he said, "This is a software company in California." And he's like, so what should I do with these two guys? And it's like, well, send them out, and then when they come back, they have to argue the other person's position. And it was like it was a particular issue about Betamax or VHS or something. I don't know. So it was a particular issue. I said, well, you send them out, and that when they come back, they have to. When you argue the other person's position, you can't say something like, "Well, stop," or "This is stupid. Stop." You have to argue it as if you have to convince me that you believe it. You don't have to believe it, but I want it to sound like you believe it, because you can't argue something like that unless you truly listen to the other person. So anyway, it was kind of funny because then I called him a week later because I was curious what would happen here. And I said, well, hey, what happened? And he's like, yeah, I don't know. They never came back, because it's just really just a trick to get people to listen to each other. And then once that happens, they solve their own problems. And so rather than having everything escalate and the boss be the adjudicator, okay, we're going to go this way. No, we're going to go that way. Stop it. Just, you guys go away, come back, and argue each other's position.
I'm definitely stealing that idea. I love that. So tell us, it's such a fascinating story. Tell us the story of how you wind up on the USS Santa Fe, and how that experience caused you to kind of change the way you led.
Yeah. So I was this geeky kid growing up in the 70s in New England, and we were in the Cold War, and I really felt passionately about what the country stood for and the Constitution. And I decided not to go down the scientist path like my dad. I come home and told my mom, hey, I'm going to join the military. And she's like, ah. But I said, look, there's submarines. They hide from people. It'll be perfect for me. And she's like, yeah, I can see that. So I went into submarines, and my leadership book at the time that the government gave me said leadership can be defined as directing the thoughts, plans, and actions of others. Directing. And who was I to question that? And to be honest, I liked it, and I was good at it. And I liked it because I visualized a world where I was the leader, and through my force of intellect, had the team do what my great ideas were. As a result, we would get better, and then they'd be happier. And then so what happened was I just happened to go to my first job was a place that needed some help, and I applied this approach, and it worked. And we got better, and the team sort of grudgingly went along. And then when I left, you know what happened? Back to the way it was. And that was even more proof of what a great leader I was. And certainly in the eyes of the Navy, I got awards, I got promoted, maybe a submarine captain. Now, sure, I always had, there was a Jekyll and Hyde part of it to it. I liked being the guy giving orders and instructions and seeing the problem first, but I didn't like it when my boss did that to me. And I'm pretty sure the team didn't like it happening to them. Of course, I said, hey, you guys are empowered. Hey, you guys speak up. I would invite them to speak up, but it always occurred within this structure of I'm going to tell you what to do. Leader's the decider. The teams, they execute. The leader gets to make the what decisions. The team only gets to make how decisions. Fast forward. So I get selected. I'm going to go to the submarine command, it's a great job. I was all jazzed up to go to this job. And for 12 months, the Navy sends you to school to learn your ship. And knowing and telling is linked. The person who knows gets to tell, and the person who's the teller better know the answer. So we spent a lot of time making sure the person's who's the CEO or the CEO or whatever, the boss, knows the answer. And then at the very last minute, so I had 2 weeks ago, after this 12 months of studying one submarine, They said, no, you're going to go to Santa Fe because that submarine captain quit. But the kicker was it was a different kind of ship, not the kind I just spent 12 months studying, not the kind I'd ever been on before, ever in my life. Different reactor plant, missile tubes, sonar system, all the technical parts of the ship were different. And so I show up. Now I'm a believer. I mean, I was a, quote, believer in empowerment, but now my life literally depends upon it. And if I give orders, they're going to do it. And so the whole answer is the problem wasn't I gave a bad order, which is the way I would frame it in the past. The problem was I was the one giving orders. So I needed the team to tell me. And every time I told them what to do, it just made it harder. So I had the step one of the whole process was I had to shut the F up and say, well, what do you guys, I had to get really good at asking very neutral questions. Hey, what do you guys think? And I had to ask questions, and then I had to learn how to ask questions in a way that made it safe for them to speak up. And it always started with description. I learned that description is where you start. So they'd say, hey, boss, we got a problem. What do you want us to do? I would just, well, tell me more. What do you see? What do you know about it that I don't know? What do you know about it that would surprise me? So this applies. It doesn't matter whether you're running a hotel or a software company or a steel mill or a nuclear power plant or anything. It doesn't matter. This is where you want to start. You always start with description, and you want to get the person to tell you. My objective was I wanted them to say, here's what I intend to do. Because once they say that, they own it, because you can ask questions, you can say, you can veto it, but it comes from them. As soon as you say, well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get 737 MAX up in the air. I want you to build these cars with diesel engines that have high performance and emissions compliant, whatever. Yeah, boss, but we can't do that. It's not, hey, don't bother me with details. Just make it happen. And we get what we get. So now what we're doing is inviting the team into the what space. Before, that was just secret space where the boss lived. And only thing we could do is figure out how we're going to get these cars out, how we're going to get this new airplane up in the air. We don't get to say, you know what, this actually isn't a good idea. We shouldn't do it. We shouldn't launch the software. We need 2 more weeks of testing.
Yeah, and I know you encapsulate that, and I love the phrasing you use in the book, going from a leader-follower model to a leader-leader model.
Right. And so in my head, so I was a physics major, and there's laws of physics which are really hard to violate. If I drop this thing, I bet it's going to fall. Oh, look, it did. So we can't violate laws of physics, but we have all these other, quote, laws that are organizational laws. But they're not laws of physics. I kept being struck by the fact that we treated these laws like they were laws of physics. Here's an example. If you're in a permission-based organization, that's the first question is why are we getting permission? Well, I don't know. We always do. That's how we do it. It's like, well, was that a decision we made, or we just... Anyway, so you put a form in, and it has 3 people who need to sign it, and the second person says, no, I disagree. What happens in every organization I've talked to is the form goes back down to the first person to rework it and come back up to the stakeholders. There was an article about Bayer making a new initiative to make things happen faster, and they talked about in one case 8 stakeholders, and 6 are happy but 2 aren't. That means I got to go revamp the product and go back to all 8 once again. So, but again, why? So I changed that rule. I said, look, if you submit a thing and the final authority is this captain, it's going to come to me. I don't care if everybody in between votes no. I'm still going to put my eyeballs on it. I want to see it. You can vote, I don't like it. If you're in the middle, I don't like it. Or this would be a good idea if ... Well, this had tremendous, this simple thing had tremendous ramifications, because now, imagine you're a sailor, you're putting in an idea form. You know, it doesn't matter what everyone in the middle is going to say. It's going to go all the way to the boss. You're going to make sure it's a good idea. You're going to vet it with your peers. You're going to talk about it. So what happened, what middle management says is, oh, wait, my job is to filter out all the stupid ideas from all the stupid people who work here. I'm like, no. And so like people get hurt. And so this idea that it's leader and follower, white collar, blue collar, decision maker, the people who execute the decision, the what people and the how people. It's just it's not a law of physics. We can choose to do it. And I wanted everybody to think about themselves as leaders in one context. I also wanted everyone to think of themselves as followers. But a follow organization doesn't have as much cachet. But you're both at the same time. You're following the values and the principles, everybody, including the guy on top or the gal on top. We're thinking about it at my desk. How do I support those things as a leader?
So to execute on that, you, in your book, you talk about these three mechanisms, the control, competence, and clarity. And there's a whole bunch of depth of content underneath those. But let's start with the first one, with control. Tell us what does that mean? Why is it important? And maybe we'll talk about an example.
The next 10 times you go to a restaurant, get the server to choose your meal for you so that you know what you're going to have when they put it in front of you. Control, we all are addicted to control. And we think we're being safer when I can control it. But the problem is you're not. It's an illusion of safety because what you're doing is you're tamping down the sense making and the decision making and the thinking of everybody else because they're coming to you. So, well, the boss is going to tell us anyway. I don't really, how much work am I going to put into it? So you have to practice giving up control. In this exercise, go to dinner, don't order. I'm not saying, here's what a lot of people said. They hear the assignment, they go out, and they say, oh, yeah, well, what do you recommend? Chicken or fish? Oh, chicken. Okay, great, I'll have the chicken. No. You just ordered chicken. I want you not to order anything. I want you to get them to pick and put it in front of you. Then you'll know what you have. If you can't do that delegation, you can't do it at work because there's no cost at dinner versus
I thought a great example of that you gave, and at least in the book, if I remember right, it was one of the first things that you did was this idea of, the what was it, if I'm getting it right, the chiefs run the boat. Was it the chief, and yes. The idea, it was like a time off policy. Something that seems kind of harmless, right. But how you drove the decision making all the way down, and tell us a little bit more about that because I thought that was a great example.
Yeah, so Navy regulations state that for in the Navy it's a caste system like most hierarchies are, and one of the big caste divisions is between the officers and the enlisted men. So the officers are officers because they went to college. That's the only thing that really makes you an officer. Anyway, and the captain's at the top and the second in command's next. And so by Navy regs, if you're an enlisted man, your vacation form needs to be signed by the second in command. If you're an officer, it needs to be signed by the captain. Well, we also had this self-delusional talk that the chiefs, so this is a middle management, these are the senior enlisted people, ran the Navy. The chiefs ran the boat. It was delusional because they didn't, and everybody knew it, but it was happy talk. We wanted to say it to ourselves, so we kept saying it. They didn't run anything because there was no form. I asked them, I said, do you guys run the ship? Oh, yeah. I said, well, show me all the forms where after a chief signs it, there are no more signatures. There are 0 of those forms, or there were. So you're not running anything if you're not the final signature. You're not in charge. You're advising the person has, that's my feeling. So anyway, so I said, okay, do you guys want to? Yeah. I said, well, you're going to be responsible. Okay. So I said, great. And so I took this thing. You can't start with, we're going to change the way we're going to start the reactor or things like that. Like you can't muck around with those. But in terms of how we treat each other, how we manage permission slips, sure. So I said, okay, great. When it comes to vacation, all those forms, every place where there's an officer's signature, we're just going to just mark it out with big black marker, and the senior enlisted person is going to sign for all the enlisted people. And I think this was one of the best decisions I ever made. Number one, because now I'm walking the talk of this. We're going to have an empowered place. Secondly, the crew was kind of able to play mommy daddy against each other. Like they'd be a jerk to their immediate boss, but then be nice to the officer, and the officer would then override. The chief would say no, he should go on vacation, and then the officer would say yes and override him. And so we had played all these games, and now they couldn't do that. So actually, one of the consequences. There were two unexpected consequences. One was military discipline improved. The year before we had 10, the year before I took over, we had 10 mass cases, or we call them captain's mass, which is where the captain would sit down basically like a judge and pass judgment on a sailor, which meant it needed to be a pretty serious offense. The next year we had 0 because the guys did what their chiefs told them to do, which before they could kind of play this game. They didn't. So that was number one. Number two is we had to end up with every sailor signed up to stay in the Navy, 100%. Why? I think it's because they looked at their chief and they said, this person matters. They control the destiny of the organization and the people who work for him or her. And that's a job that's worth having, as opposed to what it was before, which was these people are just rubber stamped. They don't have any authority. Why would you say? Because a very small number can jump from being an enlisted person to an officer. There's a small program for that. But in general, like if you're an enlisted person, you look to the senior enlisted person. You say, is that the job I want to stay around 20 years to have? And the answer was no, obviously, because it was a crap job that they had no authority. So now that all changed, and it all changed for that one little thing. Now, a little codicil to this was, so my XO, though, got upset because he was the guy who used to sign all these papers. And so now he's losing authority. So I said, okay, great. You can be the final signature for the officers. So that was normally the cap. So I pushed it down to him to assuage his ego. And then I just wrote a little memo saying that this was the policy on board the Santa Fe and signed it. And it was no longer in compliance with Navy regulations. No one ever took me to task for that because the benefits, like the ship immediately started going way, everything went way up.
Although it's a sign it should go way down, right?
Yeah. Well, any ship can be a submarine once.
I like that. But let's not lose the significance of what you said. I think you said that each of the enlisted men kind of re-upped, whereas when before this, that ship had the worst retention. So that's a heck of a improvement.
Yeah, well, that was why I went there, was because the captain quit. The ship had two problems. He had the lowest morale in the Navy, and one of the metrics for that is how many sailors sign up to stay in the Navy, and it's typically you want about half. And the Santa Fe had 10%, which is way below. It was the bottom of the fleet, so 3 out of 33. And the second thing was it was performing poorly with metrics like getting underway on time or inspection scores and these kind of things. So the captain resigned a year early, which was created the opportunity for me to go there, and I respect him for doing that. It was a little bit of a controversy in the Navy because he ended up getting promoted, which I thought that was the right call because he did serve for 2 years, and then he got out of the way. But yeah, we had bad morale. But look, no one. Here's what I think. No one goes to work and wants to be told what to do and just be a cog and not be listened to. Nobody likes that. It doesn't matter how many foosball tables you buy and you spread around. It's not going to matter for that. And I get sick and tired of looking like at these engagement. Oh, to have a good engagement. There's like this 20-point plan you're going to have company picnics and blah, blah, blah. No one cares. Here you want to have engaged people, give them the ability to make decisions. That's step one. Step two, repeat step one. That's all there is to it. Because as soon as they can make decisions, now they feel like they're contributing for real. And once they feel like they're contributing, now they'll feel better. It's the contribution that makes us feel better. It's not feeling better that makes us contribute.
Beautiful. Love it. So the first big idea is about, as a leader, giving up that control to create more
Yeah,
leader.
yeah.
And I love, the idea of starting out small with approving time off, not starting off with something that, that can be
Right.
catastrophic. And then that leads us into the second big idea, which is, if you are going to give up that control, you need to make sure you've got people
Yeah.
that have a level of competence that you can rely on them. So talk about that second big idea, that second mechanism of competence.
Yeah. So first of all, going back to control for a second. So one of the things that we do with executive teams or executives that we're coaching is we'll say, okay, write down every decision you made this week. Like just keep next to your computer. And then go back and pick one that you would like to be informed on, but you don't actually need to be the decision maker. You want someone on your team to actually make that decision and just tell you. Our big word is intent. So we want them to say, hey, we intend to.
As opposed to asking for permission. Can I do this? Yeah.
Yeah. Don't. Yeah. Right. So what normally is like, you get a form and says, I'd like request permission to comp this guest breakfast because we were supposed to pick them up and we didn't. And so it's compensation. We're going to comp them breakfast. This is what happened to me the other day. And so, and like literally, I got 2 days later, I get a note. Oh, your breakfast's on us for your remainder of your stay. Like I literally don't care anymore. Like why couldn't the front desk person just say that and just notify? So anyway, so just pick one. Don't like do the whole thing, but just pick one. And so here's the thing. And sometimes we frame it the other way around. So we say, imagine what your team is coming to you with this intent statement. They're saying, hey, here's what I intend to do. What would you want to know about that? And typically, there's two big piles of things to know. One is it like technically the right thing to do? Have we done the testing? Have we built it correctly? Have we done quality check? Is it legal? Blah, 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 blah. So these are the technical things. And then there's like, is it what we want to do? So this is kind of like how are we, and then what, or why are we doing it? And that's where this competence comes from. I made a mistake multiple times where I just gave too much control. I now view it as abdication because my team would come to me and say, here's what I intend to do. And this is why it's intent. If you just were going to say yes all the time, you might as well just say, just go do stuff, which we don't think is a good way to run a nuclear submarine or a company or anything. So what you want is people stating what they're going to do before they do it. Hey, next week when we meet with this new potential client, we intend to offer the following bundle. Well, that's going to require the software team and the product development team and the delivery teams to all get aligned. Hey, can we do this? Can we deliver it on time, et cetera? I was talking to a client that just went from their first contract was $20 million. Their second contract was a $900 million contract. So like, so in order for the sales guy to be able to sell that, we need to know the company. So anyway, so you say, hey, here's what I intend to do. And you create a conversation, not, oh, just by the way, I just did this thing. That's not really what you want. But in order to do that, we need to know, can we do it? So I think this is a big problem. Most organizations are reluctant to understand their people's competence because it feels like we don't trust them. Like I gave my officers a test every week, a written exam every week, except for 2. They had 2 weeks off, so I had 50 exams a year. So I had a very good sense of their technical. These are hard exams that you could fail, and I took the test as well, and I rarely was the number one highest score, which was fine. but some captains would think that was threatening. I didn't care. Didn't think it was great. So in any event, but I wanted to model the behavior I wanted my guys to have. So you need to know people's competence if you want to let them make decisions. I mean, it just makes sense if you say, well, I'm going to let you make decisions about the nuclear reactor. You need to know about the nuclear reactor. Well, fill in nuclear reactor with anything.
Yeah, and one of the things you talk about it is the idea of specifying goals, not methods within competence. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So if a person on your team, like the product owner, comes to you and says, "Hey, I got to make a decision, A or B," and you're like, "B." Like you think you know the answer. You immediately I say, "Oh yeah, I've done this before," and you're like, "B." And so you just made the decision for them. So you poached their ownership and their ability to grow into a leader. So what you want to do is is be clear on what we're trying to achieve. So say, well, look, here, this is what's really important here. This is a new client. It's a new area. We really got to get this one right. Speed to market isn't as important in this case as quality of delivery and client satisfaction, unless the speed is like part of that, whatever. But you convey, I think of these as weighting dials on the decision. So, I'm going to dial this factor up and this factor down. And so I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm telling you how to think about the decision and then see what they come up with, because you've got 10 of these you're thinking about. They don't have one, or maybe they have three, but you have 30, whatever. They're going to come up with something that you haven't thought of. But if you tell them the answer, all you get is what you know, and you're not leveraging all the brains of everybody else in the organization. That's the most underutilized resource we have in every organization, which means on the planet, is everybody's thinking, because we run organizations in ways which result in the thinking staying in here and not coming out here.
I love that. And what it does, if you, the way leadership typically works, where we're giving the answer or we're giving advice, what we're modeling for folks, what we're kind of training folks to do the next time they have a problem is come ask us, versus giving them the ability to think about it themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. We're creating dependencies. Why? Well, either I don't think about it, and that's just what people did to me, or two, I like it because then I have a reason for my paycheck, and I have a big line of people out my door waiting to come see the exalted one. You're so I can make decisions. And you're the bottleneck. Yeah, you're the hero, which replace hero with bottleneck. You're the bottleneck, and the organization, and you feel like you're going 100 miles an hour, but the organization's has a long delay times, because until they can get to you, everyone is sitting on their hands. That's the permission was designed in the industrial age to prevent employees from doing things. So if you're running a permission-based organization, you're running it using a structure that's designed to stop people from doing things. And if you come to me and say, well, how come my people aren't expressing initiative, and how come it takes 18 months to get a product to market when I think it should only take 6. It's like, well, you're a permission-based organization. You're running it using a structure that is deliberately designed to stop people from being able to take action. So you get what you get. Run it with intent. Then you get alignment and action.
So the first big idea was control, to create this leader environment. Was control, giving up that control, right. Letting them control it more throughout the organization. Second one was competence. To do that, people have to be competent. And then the third is clarity. Tell us about that. Tell us a little bit more about clarity.
So competence, I think competence really rests in the individual to build and develop and demonstrate their competence. I can't make you smart on Python coding. You need to do that. But clarity is, why are we doing this? And these were really, really interesting conversations to me, because the officer would come to me and he would say, hey, I'm going to submerge. I intend to submerge the submarine next hour over here in this location. And the technical part would be pretty pro forma. He would say, I've checked the water depth and the hatches are shut, all personnel are below, and we've been assigned this water, and long litany. And then I would say, well, why? Like, why did you decide that? What's behind that decision? How does that align with what we're trying to achieve? And then it would get really interesting. And often I realized I knew things about what we were trying to do with the mission that they didn't know. And it was because I hadn't told them, much as I thought I had, or I'd only told them once and not enough, or whatever it happened to be. So clarity often comes down from the top, but you need to hear the reflection back to you. So tell me, what's your thinking? What are we trying to achieve here? And these are the kind of conversations that I think really helped them develop into being future submarine commanders, because the most basic, I think the first clarity question out of your mouth could be, what's the time horizon over which you're planning on winning? Like, what's your, what are you trying to win for today? Yeah, I'm just got to get through this event. Okay, well, then you're going to use different people. Then you say, well, I'm trying to build a team for the next quarter century, not for the next quarter. Well, so I'm living in this quarter by quarter basis as opposed to what I really want. So typically, higher in the organization, people have these longer time horizons, and lower, it's not. Now, some tension might be healthy and some going back and forth, but let's know. I had a client once. Their motto was something like building quality products, blah blah blah, for the long run. And the CEO was speaking. I was coming up next, and I built this electronic poll real quick, and I said, "Hey, I just want to know, what do you guys think? What defined the long run?" And I had multiple choice, and I had a week, month, year, decade, and then just for fun, I wrote today and century. And we had responses in every category.
Not very clear.
So, yeah, right. So we think, oh, this is super clear because I know what I mean when I said it. But if you didn't hear it reflected back, you got people making decisions. They're just trying to get through today. It's going to be a different decision.
Yeah, I see that so often in the CEOs and leadership teams I work with. Very often, the CEO believes they've got a vision for the organization, and that vision could be 1 year, 3 year, could be a 10 to 15 year, big, hairy, audacious goal. But they've got this vision that they believe is clear in their head. And because they alluded to it 2 or 3 times over the last 18 months, right, of course, everybody else knows what it is. And by the way, there are 2 problems. One is everybody else doesn't know what it is because you didn't talk about it enough. The second one is very often they're not even as clear in their own head as they think they are. Right. So I've seen this play out in organizations. Right. And by the way, what it does is it adds more stress on the leader because they've got to babysit everybody. You get to be the hero, but that's no fun. That's stressful.
Yeah. Well, that's what I think. Yeah, so that's the model. It's, well, if people really don't know, if people can't make their own decisions, and maybe it's just benign lack of communication, or maybe it's not benign, but if they can't make their own decisions, they got to come to me. This is the dictator's playbook. This is how you create dependencies. Never let them know what you're really thinking because they got to come to me and get every decision vetted. And I'm going to say, yes, good, yes, no. It's like the inspector at the end of the automobile assembly line. So instead, bake the quality of the decision or bake the quality of the paint into the assembly line. And you do that by building teams that can think and make decisions, and by the structure of how you run meetings and those kind of things, and the communication. So I spent a lot of time controlling the structure of the communications, which allowed me to release a high degree of control over we're going to load this torpedo and that torpedo tube tomorrow, because the structure of the communication resulted in a quality, a good paint scheme, or a good decision in this case, coming out the far end of the assembly line.
So here's the question that came up. I said earlier, that we reviewed your book, and we with a client, just in the last month, reviewed the book. And I always focus on, I don't want a book report. Don't tell me what you thought of the book. Like, what from this
Yeah, yeah,
book
yeah.
are we gonna inject into the DNA of this organization? Let's talk about that. And they were super excited.
Yeah.
And the question came up that I promised I would ask you. So I talked to them, I'm like, hey, I'm interviewing him on my podcast. I can ask this question. Is, think about not a sub, but a typical organization that's got, their sales function and their marketing function and their finance function, et cetera, et cetera. Is this something, this whole leader idea, is this something that needs to be implemented from the top? The whole organization is now leader, or is this something where
Yeah.
the technology team could go, we don't care what the rest of the organization's doing right now, we love this idea, we're implementing leader in the technology organization? Could you do that piece by
Yeah.
piece, or does it have to be more kind of big bang, everybody does it?
Yeah. Well, I think it's easier and better if everyone does it, and the person or the people at the top have to be on board. I think it's really extremely like I wasn't the head of the Navy, but I was the head of my submarine, so I had a lot of control over what happened on that ship. And we would go to sea, we would submerge, we'd be 1,000 miles away from my boss, and so I was setting the tone for the culture and the communication protocols on the submarine. I think it's hard to do. Like if you're the chief marketing officer and the CEO's not on board, I think it's gonna be really, really hard. Now, if you're head of engineering and it's a little bit more insular and you got your team and you're doing your thing, I think you could, like we see agile
Sure.
like transformation happen within an engineering team, but we see now that you kind of run into a limit what you can do if the rest of the organization isn't thinking and aligned in the same way. So that's one of the things I like about this Bayer thing. They're essentially applying agile across the whole organization. So I think the answer is it's probably possible, but I don't have any really good examples of that. And all the things happen. You need leadership support. It doesn't cost any money to do this. I mean, you can bring us in or you and that kind of thing, but you don't need to buy new software or anything like that. You just need to start practicing different behaviors in meetings and in one-on-one conversations. And every time someone comes up to you and says, tell me what to do, you don't tell them what to do. So it's just a matter of you controlling your own behavior and your own language, and then having that. It always starts with self. We always say start with self. That's why we say go to dinner, don't order. Start with you. Don't give a lecture. Don't say, oh, all these people out here need to speak up. These people out here need to tell me what they intend to do. It's like, no, you need to be quiet and then stop telling them what to do and ask them what they intend to do.
And you just mentioned, you could hire you or somebody like me to come in
Yeah.
and help. For this, I'd hire you, not me. But to follow up on that, tell me a little bit about your business. You've written books. I know you do keynote speaking. What does your business look like? How do you
Yeah.
go out there and help folks today?
Yeah. So I started a company, wrote a book, started to sell. People said, help, come do speeches. So that's fine. So I went out and I kind of learned how to do a talk like the one we did at the Gazelles conference down in Orlando, where you were. And so that was interesting. Used a different part of my brain. There's no real reason that you should be able to write a book and give a speech, but I think they're two different skills anyway. So then we had companies say, well, hey, can you help us? So then we started building a consulting team. But I was still like, because I started the company, I was like the president. And I realized this is really, I was on the road all the time. I did 100 events
Wow.
one year. And I really wasn't the right guy to be the president, but because that's how it is. And I really was like trying to control everything. So I spun the company off. So the consulting company is a different group and they basically do their own thing. So I do keynotes. I'll do something up to a day. I don't have attention span for anything that's longer than a day. So I do keynotes and masterclass and that kind of stuff. And often it's part of companies that want to do transformational stuff where we like to get in and get out because if we're not doing that, like we're not going to be like one of these other guys whose objective is to get in and never get out, because we don't think that that's consistent with the leadership approach. The leadership approach is we're going to, like, if you need help building course curriculum, doing some classes, or we'll do train the trainer, building like a playbook for your company. Here's how we're going to manage request forms, and these are a governance thing where, okay, who gets to make this kind of decision, and is the decision going to be I did it, or like we have a ladder here, so we define things in terms of like what's the level of the ladder where this where you get to influence the decision. I intended, that's what we like, so that's why it's bigger. And then we want to get out of there. We want to get some metrics at the beginning, metrics at the end, see what we did. And hopefully everyone's happy, and then get out of there. So I'm better off, I think, doing content creation. I love doing keynotes. I get to fly around the world and go to all fun places and try and convince my wife to go with me. So that's wonderful. And then we have a team to really dig in and observe meetings and take metrics. One of the metrics that we have is how much does each person talk in a meeting? And what we're looking for is to see whether there's a big skew. Typically it's the boss, the senior people end up talking.
Yeah, I've actually had leadership teams I work with where I start them off with this 2-day meeting, and I've had to pull the CEO aside first morning break to say, stop talking first. Because when you talk first, everybody listens, they take it as an order, and they shut up. Let everybody else talk. And that's tough. That's tough for them to do. So if someone wants to find out more about, either hiring you for a keynote or a master class or the consulting thing that other folks do, where should people go to find out more?
Yeah, I have a website, davidmarquet.com. You go there, there's a form, you can shoot it there. I'm on LinkedIn. You can connect with me there and then send me a note. And then we have a YouTube channel called Leadership Nudges where I have about 400 of these very short, like go to dinner, don't order. That's nudge number 61, which short things, because our belief is we act our way to new thinking. We start with action. Not, I don't know what.
Yeah, but now hold on a second. If you don't, and I don't know if it'll be in the video, but if you're listening on audio, you don't see it. But for some reason, on like FaceTime and Zoom and all these different video apps, when you like put your thumb up, you get a big thumbs up. When you say some word, there's fireworks behind you. So if you didn't see it, there was just fireworks behind.
Yeah, I just had fireworks. Something I said sparked fire. So anyway. Off track.
We were talking about where to go if people want to find out more.
Yeah. Okay, so davidmarquet.com and the LinkedIn and then the YouTube channel. It's called Leadership Nudges. It's a lot of teams watch them. They come out on Wednesday and then they talk about them. But these are we try and make them very short, 90-second habits or practices that you can do. Go to dinner, don't order. We act our way to new thinking, not think our way into new action.
Love it. Well, in wrapping up, I always say, if you want a great company, you need a great leadership team. David, thanks so much for helping us get there today. Really loved having you on the show.
Cheers. Thanks, Mike.